Welcome everybody to lecture 4 in this series. We have seen in the previous lecture that one particular Maxwell's equation in a particular condition is not invariant under Galilean transformation. Of course, as we emphasized, one counterexample disproves a claim, so we cannot say that Galilean invariance is a general property, or in other words, a law of physics as far as Maxwell's electrodynamics is concerned. And we have seen that there is an inconsistency in this context with Newtonian mechanics, which we have seen is Galilean invariant. This time we will examine a set of transformations suggested by a gentleman called Lorentz, which is found to keep Maxwell's equations invariant. Even before Einstein came up with the special theory of relativity, these transformations were proposed in a somewhat ad hoc fashion just to make Maxwell's equation satisfy invariance when you go from a frame S to a frame S prime, both of which are inertial, and S prime is moving with respect to S with a uniform velocity V. Again, look at the diagrams on top of page 18, which is the first page of lecture 4. Now, Lorentz proposed a set of transformations as you go from S to S prime. And these transformations are listed in equation 52 in the same page. Many of you, although you may not have studied special relativity, are familiar with these transformations. The points to note are twofold. First of all, as you go from S to S prime, we see that the time coordinate also changes depending on the value of X. In other words, the rate of flow of time is different. And the importance that this difference carries is something that I pointed out to you as early as 2 lectures back. The second point to note is that these equations involve, the transformation equations, involve the velocity of light, c. We found that in the previous lecture, when Galilean invariance was being studied, c was entering through the relation mu naught epsilon naught equals 1 over c squared. Now c is entering in an ad hoc manner, of course, in order to cancel the nuisance terms which destroyed invariance in the previous case. So that apparently makes it inconsistent with Galilean transformation, which is indeed the case. But you should also notice that these reduce to Galilean transformation in the limit where V is very small compared to C. That is to say, all motions, in particular the motion of one inertial frame with respect to another, such motion takes place with speeds very small compared to the speed of light. In that limit, all the offending terms go away. Offending means the ones that make difference from Galilean equations, and equation 52. This equation is reduced to the original Galilean transformation equations. Now, as I have already mentioned at least twice, these were introduced in an ad hoc fashion. And if these turn out to be the equations, then Lorentz also calculated how the electric and magnetic field vectors should transform. Their transformation equations were earlier given, which were equations 41 in the previous lecture. Now you have equation 53. Now, if the coordinates and time transform according to equation 52, then studying electrodynamics in terms of them, it is possible to show that equation 53 is a must. Equation 53 compares the Lorentz transformations of electric and magnetic field with those transforming under Galilean transformation. And the equations on the left-hand side are consistent with the Lorentz transformations. How this consistency is established is something that we will not discuss now. We will leave it till the end of the course before we tell you how at least we proceed to verify the Lorentz transformations of electric and magnetic fields as encapsulated in equation 53. Let us keep some suspense, because in order to arrive at the derivation or arrive at the proof, we need to understand the underlying theory a little better. And I think then we will be in a better position to appreciate how the electric and magnetic field transformations come about. So what we can do at present is the following. Take Lorentz transformations in an ad hoc fashion. If X and T transform the way we are claiming, and if a logical consequence is that E and B transform in the way we have shown in equation 53, here we show that Maxwell's equations then remain invariant. But I am wrong. We don't really show that. The particular equation that we took up the previous time and the particular configuration under which, with E and B in specific directions and with the charge moving along the X direction in each case, in such case we saw the Galilean transformation is invalid. All we will do in this case is to show that Lorentz transformation maintains the form of Maxwell's equation, one particular equation in this case. It is a plausibility argument. It is an illustration, not a complete demonstration. But for that, the rest of your life is ahead of you. You are now second-year undergraduates. I just want you to be charged with this and delve with me headlong into the subject of special relativity. So the task is simpler. The remaining task is some algebra. Now, you have your del B, del X, del E, del T, etc. We take up the same equation, curl B, and without any magnetic field, electric current, curl B, and the charge is moving in the same direction. So the identity of Lorentz force in the two frames is to be assumed and finally shown to be consistent. So a new thing that comes is, for example, the second equation in 54, del E del T. Del you have del E del T equal to del E del T prime times del T prime del T plus del E del X prime times del X prime del T. What does that mean? T prime is non-trivially altered as we go from S to S prime. So this is the new input here. Now, given the equations which are listed in equation 52, the rest is just partial calculus. It is just following step by step, and all the steps are written in full detail in my notes. 54, then comes to 55, and so on. And we proceed to the case where del B del X and del B del T are increasingly simplified, not only with E and B replaced by E prime and B prime, but also X and T making way for X prime and T prime, that is to say, the space and time coordinates in the new frame. After that, we use the particular Maxwell's equation in this case, del B del X equal to minus 1 over C squared del E del T, the same thing that we took up the previous time, and then we go on to simplify it. It is a sort of messy collection of terms, but after the slightly messy algebra is gone through, you arrive at equation 59. There you see that you are in a position to cancel a common factor 1 minus v squared over c squared from both sides, and 1 over square root of v squared, 1 minus v squared by c squared is given the familiar name gamma in special relativity. We will occasionally use it, and we have already used it in this derivation. It is just a notation, but once you arrive at equation 59, you can see that this bracket can be cancelled from both sides in cases where the velocity is not c, not equal to c, remember. Then you find that you have equation 60 as the consequence, which basically gives the equation the same form as what was written in frame S. So S prime and S for this particular case retains the form of Maxwell's equations. So at least in one case where Galilean transformation did not work, we have succeeded in demonstrating that Lorentz transformation does work for Maxwell's equation. Of course, it is the next task to prove it in detail for all configurations, for all of Maxwell's equations, all 4 of them. But this is something that we will not enter into, because our basic purpose at this stage is to get excited about special relativity and see that something that Galilean transformation, the way we are taught in Newtonian mechanics, the Newtonian kinematics more precisely, something that this kind of thing could not do for electrodynamics is done by these alien looking, weird looking Lorentz transformations. This is the first lesson that I want to sink into all of us, and this was the purpose of this lecture. But having gone through this calculation, I want you also to kind of be part of the game, and therefore I assign a homework problem. Now take up the another one of Maxwell's equations, curl E plus del B del T equal to 0. Take the same field configuration and whatnot, and then in the same manner, same charge movement, prove that this curl E plus del B del T for the same kinds of fields and same kind of charge motion, this is invariant as you grow from S to S prime, and of course where you transform E and B and also the coordinates and time according to the prescriptions of Lorentz transformation. Before we end this discussion, I ask you to note a few points. First of all, some built-in ideas into Lorentz transformation, even before we take up special relativity postulates per se. First of all, V cannot be equal to C. Otherwise, not only don't the common bracket on both sides of equation 59 don't cancel, but even more fundamentally, the transformation equations themselves become undefined if V is equal to C, because there is 1 minus B squared over C squared in the denominator. And also, if V is greater than C, then this quantity gamma, which is a part of the transformation equations, becomes imaginary, square root of a negative quantity. What does it mean? As you go from one frame to another, the coordinates and the time coordinate from real in the first frame, they become imaginary in the second frame. Certainly not a physically acceptable proposition. Therefore, if and when we will establish the overall physics perspective, we will have to understand this fact that this perspective is limited to situations where speeds of objects do not exceed the velocity of light. That it cannot exceed the velocity of light if special relativity has to be true. And no object can move with higher velocity, because if an object is moving with velocity v greater than c, then you can always attach a reference frame to that object. And for that reference frame, the Lorentz transformation equations will lead to imaginary coordinates on time. So physically inadmissible situations are already being noticed if velocities are allowed to exceed the velocity of light. The next observation is about the velocity of light itself. Normally you would have expected that you go from frame S to S prime and the velocity of light also changes accordingly. But there, mu naught epsilon naught equals 1 over c squared becomes a little confusing because the permittivity of free space and the permeability of free space are normally assumed to be just some intrinsic property of free space without any reference frame being attached to it. So it is somehow inbuilt in Maxwell's equation itself that velocity of light doesn't care about which reference frame you are in if the equations have to be valid in more than one inertial frames. And so therefore, and the transformation equations are also carrying such a message. When you go from S to S prime, you have C is as a quantity in the transformation parameter. You may very well ask, what the hell is this? C is to be defined in a particular frame, and I am going from S to S prime. Tomorrow you will go from S prime to S double prime. You will continue to use the same C. Unfortunately, that is what is required in order to achieve consistency with Maxwell's equations in every frame. Therefore, it seems to be suggested very strongly here itself that the velocity of light is same in all frames. That can only happen if the time flow is same, but even then it is a somewhat intriguing postulate that is already entered into our field. So our next goal is to justify these kinds of built-in ideas and to motivate Lorentz transformation from some more fundamental considerations. That is what we'll take up in the lectures to come. But before that will come lecture 5, where an experimental result will be reported, where it was indeed found that the velocity of light is same velocity of light in free space, more precisely, is same in two frames which are moving with uniform velocity with respect to each other. How in experiments people saw that is something that we will discuss next time. Okay, we stop here. Thank you very much.